Mr. President, do you regret your decision to run for re-election? Do you think that that made it easier for your predecessor to now become your successor?
I don't think so. I think I would have beaten Trump, could have beaten Trump, and I think that Kamala could have beaten Trump and would have beaten Trump.
But she didn't beat Donald Trump. And internal polling from the Biden camp indicated that he was not going to beat Donald Trump. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is because of the mental decline. What I do know is that Cenk wants to talk. So Cenk, what do you think?
Look, guys, this is super massive. We're about to show you even more embarrassing clips from Mika Brzezinski, where she humiliates herself by agreeing with him. And we've got more along those lines. I just got to say, if you thought that Kamala Harris would have won a race, she actually ran and lost just a couple of months ago, you might be in mental decline. So the people that are still defending Biden and Harris, they drive me nuts. I mean, look at that. How could you say Kamala Harris would have won? Well, we just had the race and she didn't win, let alone the mental thing of saying that you would have won when your own advisor said you would have lost 400 electoral college votes and had a 0% chance of winning. But it's the ego, guys. And please stop inflating their ego. The more that everybody demands that left-wing media kiss Democratic ass, the bigger their egos get, the more detached from reality they get. And they leave us in this unbearable situation where we have no leaders who are going to lead us in the right direction to win elections and to actually deliver for the American people.
I mean, there is no leader of the Democratic Party at the moment. There isn't a roster of impressive talent that I can point to look forward to the future of the Democratic Party. The Democrats are cooked. I want people to realize that. And the part of the reason why they're cooked is because being a public servant that people find desirable as their representative or their president or their senator requires self-reflection and taking personal responsibility for failures and getting better. But everything that I've heard from the mainstream Democratic Party following the presidential election has been an unwillingness to engage in self-reflection. And instead, I hear a lot of people, Democratic politicians, lashing out at voters. I hear a lot of gross rhetoric about like, oh yeah, we're losing Latino voters. Well, they can enjoy their deportation. That is not a sign of a winning party. That is a sign of a flailing party that just refuses to do the hard work necessary to win. And remember, these are people who are supposed to be public servants. We are not their public servants. They are our public servants, but they don't see it that way. So let's get back to the issue of the internal polling of the Biden campaign, which showed that he was not poised to win in a matchup against Trump.
Then we find out when the Biden campaign becomes the Harris campaign that the Biden campaign's own internal polling at the time when they were telling us he was the strongest candidate showed that Donald Trump was going to win 400 electoral votes.
And of course, just to repeat ourselves again, we just had a presidential election in which Kamala Harris did run against Donald Trump and she did not win. Donald Trump won the popular vote. He swept the swing states. I mean, it was a political bloodbath for the Democratic Party. And in case Biden does not remember just how much of a political bloodbath that was, we've got a reminder.
It is now official. CNN projects that Donald Trump has been elected president, defeating Vice President Kamala Harris and making a political comeback unlike any.
Now, in all seriousness, we should also note that Americans are deeply unhappy with Biden's time in office, and that's according to some new polling that was done by the Associated Press. So let's take a look at this chart. It'll explain exactly what I'm talking about here. Only 25% of Americans said that Biden's term was either good or great. In contrast, though, 36% of Americans said Trump's first term was great or good when he left office. And 52% of Americans said Obama's 2 terms were great or good when he left office. Now, according to the same Associated Press reports, in this new poll, disappointment was especially palpable among Black and Hispanic Americans. So this is something we've been talking about on the show quite a bit consistently because it's a trend that should be concerning for mainstream Democrats. They are in fact losing support among Black men and Latinos in general. In contrast with Obama, or the contrast with Obama was especially striking among Black Americans. So let's take a quick look at that. About 6 in 10 said that Obama had kept his promises at the end of his term, compared with around 3 in 10 who said the same for Biden. Similarly, about 7 in 10 Black Americans said they and their family were better off at the end of Obama's presidency, while only about a third said that about Biden. Now, I think a lot of this does have to do with inflation, and the inflation had multiple factors to it, multiple reasons why certain sectors of the economy were experiencing inflation. But supply chain disruptions as a result of COVID were one of those factors. And Biden could have done more to essentially mobilize whatever domestic resources we have to alleviate the inflation that was impacting Americans and their personal finances. He didn't do that. And by the way, the same sentiment was shared by Americans across the board. About 4 in 10 Americans said that they and their families are somewhat or much worse off than they were when Biden became president, while about 1/4 said that they are much or somewhat better off. At least half of Americans said that Biden had a negative impact on the cost of living, immigration, and the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, compared with about 2 in 10 who said he had a positive impact in each of these arenas. And one more bit of data or information for you here, Cenk. He was also perceived as having more of a negative impact than a positive one on Russia's war with Ukraine, despite his administration pushing for billions of dollars in military aid to Kiev. So, I mean, I wouldn't say despite providing the financial aid. I would say providing the financial military aid to Ukraine is part of the reason why Americans are not happy with his foreign policy. But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so the numbers for Biden are absolutely disastrous. And so when we warned about these numbers 15 months ago, people yelled at us and said, how dare you? But if you don't know what the real numbers are, you're gonna get slaughtered. And we lost all of the swing states because no one had the courage to actually look at the numbers and see where we're going wrong so that we can fix it. But instead, we ran into Biden's giant ego, and until the very last second, and only when all of his donors left the building, and that's the real reason, by the way, that he left the race. No, Americans love Joe Biden. But I'm like, but the polling indicates they do not love Joe Biden. You could say it 2,000 times, it isn't going to make it true. It's such a deep addiction to propaganda the Democratic leadership has. That's why I don't know if it's mental decline for Biden saying, oh, I would have won and Kamala would have won, or if he's just so used to lying with no accountability. Because remember, he said that his uncle was eaten by cannibals and that he was arrested with Nelson Mandela fighting against apartheid. These are outrageous lies, and they were barely a blip in mainstream media. Those stories would have lasted forever and ever if it was Trump. So he can say the most outrageous lies and no one ever held him to account. So now you've got a situation where only 2 in 10 Americans thought that he was, only 1 in 10 Americans thought he was doing a great job, or less than that, right? And among Democrats, the numbers weren't that much better. Among the young, they're awful. Only about 10% thought he was doing great or even good. And remember how they're like, oh, don't worry about it. The young love Democrats. The young love Joe Biden. It wasn't true. They generally like left-wing policies, but Joe Biden didn't do left-wing policies. And last thing, for now at least, is on Israel, his numbers are horrific. Like either 20% or lower. With young, it's just nearly 0%. And Biden was like, he made an active decision that he would rather lose the election, and whether it was him or Kamala Harris, than defy his donors who told him, you will do everything Israel demands of you. He chose his donors over his voters, and it showed.
Yep. Now, look, as Biden is now leaving the White House, you should know that he's focusing on important work, including the fact that he just issued a statement announcing that he has decided to name a new aircraft carrier, USS George W. Bush. A war criminal, but he's Biden's war criminal nonetheless. I mean, insane.
No, it's more than insane. It's a betrayal. So remember when they told you that the 2 elections that George Bush was in were the most important elections of our lifetime? Remember when they, told you how awful and terrible George W. Bush was? And by the way, who told you that they didn't mean it? We did. We told you, no, there's corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans. You're tired of me saying it for the last 20 years, right? And what did I tell you? Good cop, bad cop. What's every awful deal that has been done in Washington is Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell agreeing to usually tax cut for their donors or more subsidies for their donors. And so there is no difference. And who voted for the Iraq war? Joe Biden did. Hillary Clinton did. John Kerry did. Every Democratic leader voted for that war. And now Biden's full mask off. He's like, oh, I love George W. Bush. We were always lying when we told you he was a danger, existential danger, a threat to the country, threat to the world. Of course, we're giant liars. Now I'm sitting here kissing his ass. And Dick Cheney, Kamala Harris loves him, campaigned all across the country with him. These are the people we fought tooth and nail against for decades. And now the Democratic leadership is spitting in the face of their own voters going, we were always lying to you. We were always best friends with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. Told you.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.